Earlier in the year, I covered Islamabad Kingdom Brunel and how his amazing ideas and inventions changed both the face of the railways and the UK with his amazing designs. One of Brunel's inventions was the introduction of broad gauge track. The wider gauge allowed for the engine to run at higher speeds a lot smoother. Today, we have the pleasure of looking at one of his broad gauge engines, the Iron Duke. Brunel's broad gauge line between Paddington and Bristol was designed with speed and comfort in mind. It had gentle gradients and minimum curvatures, but it needed very specific engines to run it. He hoped that the wide tracks would increase speed and efficiency, and since the railway companies had yet to standardise its gauge of tracks nationwide, Brunel hoped that his gauge would prove superior and be adopted by other railway companies. For his idea to work though, he needed a superior engine to run the line. Bear in mind it had only been 7 years since rocket had made its debut with its impressive 30 miles an hour. Brunel wanted not only to top rocket speed, but double it. The answer came in the form of Daniel Gooch. He was a very young lad, merely 21 when Brunel discovered him. Gooch was obsessed with engineering, having met George Stephenson when he was just a young boy, and joined Stephenson's factory as soon as he was old enough to work. After moving to the Treagar Iron Works at South Wales, Gooch was approached by Brunel, who was very impressed with Gooch's work. Gooch was appointed superintendent of the Great Western Railway. This was the chance Gooch needed and got to work designing over 340 different locomotives. In 1846, Brunel and Gooch unveiled the Iron Duke class. The prototype, Great Western, was the first engine to come out of Swindon Works and carried a 2-2-2 wheel arrangement. The wheel arrangement had been used by Robert Stephenson for over 10 years, and it was found that locomotives with this arrangement were more stable and allowed the chassis to support a larger firebox. 2-2-2 engines were also referred to as singles due to its singular and larger pair of driving wheels. Gooch was not too happy with the arrangement on the prototype, and following an accident where the Great Western broke her leading axle, saw the opportunity to have the prototype and her sisters rebuilt into a 4-2-2 arrangement, with the front wheels sandwiched in the frames. The Iron Dukes performed better than Brunel could have ever imagined. They were the fastest steam locomotives in the world for many decades, clocking mileage at an impressive 80 miles an hour with no train weight. With a fleet of coaches, the Iron Dukes ran about 50 to 53 miles an hour and ran a service called the Flying Dutchman between London and Exeter, taking full advantage of the broader, flatter tracks. They ran dutifully to time and were very reliable. In 1865, Daniel Gooch expanded his portfolio by expanding into the telecoms business. Using the facilities he had from the Great Western, Daniel was able to help lay the first ever transatlantic cable using Brunel's own ship, the SS Great Eastern. He also dabbled in politics, taking a seat for Crickdale. He was one of the few MPs that never actually addressed Parliament, citing that it was better for business if others followed his example. By the end of the 1860s, the Iron Dukes were beginning to reach the end of their lives. Broad gauge war was being waged with more and more railways adopting the standard gauge tracks, turning the tide on the battle. The broad gauge lines were being pushed back, and with it, broad gauge engine production slowed. The Iron Duke class was slowly withdrawn, with the exception of 3 that were converted into the new Rover class. Almost all were scrapped. The very last engine to survive was Lord of the Isles. It was the last one to come off the line, and in 1893 the last broad gauge rail service left Paddington before it too was ultimately converted to standard gauge. Lord of the Isles sat alone in Swindon Works, preserved as the very last of its class. In 1906, Swindon concluded that the engine was not worthy of preservation and was scrapped. The scrapping of the engine went unnoticed throughout the years, and the extinct class was only known through drawings and photos. In 1985, as part of the Great Western celebrations, RESCO Railways wanted to recreate a working replica of the broad gauge engine. Using parts from 2 Hunslet austerity tanks, the original drawings and a lot of historical referencing, they were able to produce a working replica. The replica was formally named as the Iron Duke, both in reference to its class and in a nod to Duke of Wellington, who had defeated Napoleon in 1815. The celebrations also included 150 metres of broad gauge track for the engine to run on. Since then, the engine has toured the UK, showing off its skills and workmanship. Although not original, the engine has been preserved in the National Collection, and up until recently had been in full steam at Didcot Railway with its own track. Sadly, due to the boiler ticking expiring in 2013, the engine has been cosmetically restored for static display, and it's not known if the engine will ever steam again. Although it's not a perfect replica, and it is sad we lost the class to the ages, we do have this wonderful engine to look over, and we have Daniel Gooch to thank for bringing raw power and a brilliant locomotive to the tracks. They were called Iron Dukes, and thanks to their unrivaled power and determinations, they were very aptly and suitably named. Well, I hope you all liked today's video, and I want to wish you all, my subscribers, and your families a very happy new year, and may your year be safe and full of happiness. I sadly can't take in on the celebrations this year due to catching COVID and being in isolation. I'm fine apart from a little dizziness and the odd cough, but I'll be back out on the tracks enjoying the engines very soon. So while I can't be celebrating to you in person, I'm celebrating in spirit. And I also want to say a massive thank you to all of those that are supporting me this year. And while 2022 is not starting in the best way, I can only hope that this year will only get better and maybe be the best one yet.
Hi, dude. You look good. Go.